So I actually made a video yesterday talking about Chris Stearns' storage unit. But having got to the end of it, I had this sudden light bulb moment where I realised something quite significant, which basically screwed up the entire video. And I'll explain that when I get to the end of this video. But basically I ended up just deleting the entire video that I'd made. Hence the reason, if you were wondering, why there was no video yesterday. I was going to move on and look at different things, but then having thought about it, I thought, well, actually, it's probably not just me who had been unaware of this. So I thought I would go through and clarify a lot of things to do with the storage unit, but at the same time, I still want to have a look at Chris Stearns' contradictions when it comes to the storage unit. Because he does contradict himself quite frequently here. And I find it interesting because to me, my impression of the whole storage unit narrative is that he latched onto it as soon as the notion of Northport PD wanting to get into the storage unit because they thought that Stefan had been there. As soon as that idea came up, it seems to me that Chris latched onto that idea. I believe that he knew that his son was going to Northport to go to the house. I believe that he knew that his son went into the house. And we know that he knew that his son had removed the hard drive from his own computer when he entered the house, which also proves that Chris knew that his son entered the house. So to me, it seems that the whole storage unit narrative was something that Chris latched onto as a distraction from the fact that Stefan had in fact entered the house. The problem is he gave himself away in the interviews when he admitted that Stefan had been on the computer just before he left to go to Kissimmee, and that he must have removed the hard drive, meaning that when he returned to Northport, he actually did go in the house and remove the hard drive, because logically that is the only time that Stefan could have removed the hard drive. So unless Chris is lying to cover for himself and he removed that hard drive and disposed of it, then he definitely knows that his son entered the house, and presumably, well, he does. He knows exactly what his son was doing when he entered the house. I've done plenty of videos discussing this, so I'm not going to keep going on that. But to me, the storage unit narrative is interesting because we know it is just that, a narrative. He's latched on to the notion of the possibility of his son getting into the storage unit. He's put the whole big long spiel about how it's possible that he could have the key, but he didn't give him a key. It's possible that he might have seen the keypad, but he didn't give him the keypad code. It's possible that when the storage unit was discovered unlocked several weeks earlier, that maybe Stefan had gotten into it, or maybe Chris had actually forgot to unlock it himself. So he's being very careful not to give anything solid there. Even down to the point where, when asked if Stefan had the rights to go to the storage unit or something like that, his answer is also somewhat non-committal, and I will discuss that later on in the video because I have actually included that clip here. So I'm going to go through a number of clips first where Chris is discussing the storage unit, where he's describing the storage unit, and then I want to look at some photos at the end and offer some clarification with regards to those photos, because I know they confused me, and I'm thinking from comments I've read that I'm not the only person.
Do you know the unit number for your storage unit?
Yeah,
because obviously you see the scope of what we're doing. At some point, we may want to get that storage unit as well.
I was there a couple of weeks ago pulling out some tax boxes. There's not that much room in there. I mean, you could stash a body if you wanted to.
Okay, so this is the first instance of him establishing that the storage unit is quite crowded. He says there's not much room in there, but then he seems to contradict himself and say you could stash your body in there if you wanted to. Now, to me, having not much room implies that you wouldn't be able to stash a body in there, surely. Because, well, think about it. I don't want to go into the more morbid details of it, but even a 13-year-old girl, her body's going to take up a bit of space. So that doesn't gel with there's not much room in there. I also want to just point out, and while this is just more of an aside, at this point in time, they had been saying to Chris that they believed that Maddie was still alive, because this is before they had seen, or at least the person doing the interview was unaware, of all the images. So at the time that they are talking with Chris here, they have said to him already a few times they believe Maddie is still alive. And yet he says you could stash a body in there if you wanted to. That's just an aside. The point here is that he's claiming that it's kind of, there's not much room, but at the same time you could stash a body in there. Well, to me that implies there is a bit of room. Okay, moving on.
Because all his stuff is that he has, guitar or what have you, is stuck in the very back. And he didn't want that, but I've ended up trying to clean out our garage, and I stuck all the other stuff there, and he wouldn't like that. Nor would I think he would spend the time to pull shit out of there to get it.
Now here, he's establishing that the storage unit is so crowded that Stefan's stuff is stuck in the back there, and that the only way Stefan could get to his stuff would be to pull stuff out to get to it. So again, that's giving you the impression of a really chockers storage unit. A storage unit where, in my head, what I'm seeing is you open the door to the storage unit and you see boxes in front of you, and there's no way to get through to any other parts of the storage unit. That is my impression from what he is describing, especially when he says that Stefan's stuff is stuck in the back there, and that Stefan would have to move stuff essentially to get to his things.
So I was kind of overhearing their conversation. Would it be safe to say and accurate that your son had no rights to this storage unit at all?
If he asked my permission, I would allow it.
Did he ever ask your permission?
No.
Okay.
Now the question was if his son had no rights to the storage unit. And Chris's answer was, if he asked my permission, I would have allowed him. And the officer says, well, did he ask permission? And he says, no. You're only getting half the story here. He never actually answers the initial question. Did Stefan have rights to access the storage unit? He only answered that had Stefan actually himself asked Chris, that Chris would have given him permission. But there's two parts to this. What if Stefan never actually asked for permission himself, but Chris offered permission? Something came up, perhaps a conversation about the need to hide a hard drive, even though that we know that, according to the records, Stefan didn't actually access the unit. But let's just use that as a hypothetical. And perhaps Stefan's like, I've got to put this somewhere. And Chris goes, well, you could put it in the storage unit. There's no instance there of Stefan asking permission. Permission is just being granted without being asked, if that makes sense. So Chris has not answered the question there as to whether or not his son actually had any right to access the storage unit. And I think it's interesting because a straight yes or no answer should have been what happened here. But instead, he answers with, had he asked me, I would have given him permission. So that's not a direct answer. That's evasive. And it makes me wish that the officer had said, did you give him permission? Not, did he ask you? Because there is that difference. Okay, so let's keep listening.
Is there anything of like tremendous value in there? I know there's a bunch of bins, and I see a few suitcases and stuff like that.
Yeah, just overflow from the garage.
Some Christmas
I was going to go over and look to see if anything had been moved, because I couldn't imagine Stefan going in there. There should have been a bunch of dog crates piled up, and it's packed, other than just a small section between the bulk stuff and the racks that I have there, where I have access
on the right.
He did have some boxes of his stuff. But
Yes, but it's way so far back that he would have to empty the whole storage unit out to get it.
Okay.
Back in the left-hand corner. It's well, that's too much work. He wouldn't be willing to do that much work.
Now, it's interesting here. He's, on one hand, still establishing the notion of the storage unit being so chockers that Stefan would have to pull everything out if he wanted to get to his own stuff. And then he's referring to there being a small gap between the bulk stuff, or boxes, I'm not sure precisely what he said there, and the racks. This got my attention because later on he claims that he found the hard drive stashed between the racks. So is he trying to establish a plausible narrative here? Because this is the first time he's introduced this. Up until then, it's always been the storage unit is still chockers. And he's still, on one hand, inferring that it is so chockers that Stefan would have had to pull things out to get to his stuff at the back of the unit. But not only that, his description of finding the hard drive, which I'll come back to, doesn't match the description which is in a report which discusses the same thing. And we'll get to that.
There was not a hard drive in it.
Right, and then that surprised me. And then when I went to move out of the storage unit, it was at a location at the back. And if you've seen photos, there was a rack of shelves. And
Yeah, I was there that night when we did this.
okay, so you could easily slide back to the rear of that, and from where it was, you could easily tuck in where I found the hard drive. You could easily just placed it.
Right.
Okay, so he's gone back to the narrative of being able to just slide in along that gap between like the boxes and the racks, and that the location where he found it, you could just easily place it. The thing is, he claimed that he actually found the hard drive in a box with Stefan's missing watch. That does not sound like the hard drive having been just tucked in to a particular spot. So he's actually given two stories as to how he found the hard drive. And once again, the narrative of the storage unit being so chockers, and yet now we have this notion that Stefan could slide into the back of it and stash the hard drive away somewhere in the back there. Now we know it's all BS anyway, because A, it wasn't the hard drive from the house. This is what I like to refer to as the Decoy hard drive. And either Chris has in fact discovered this hard drive as he was clearing out this storage unit, and I do have questions as to why he suddenly needed to clear out the storage unit after Stefan was arrested. Why was it so important to suddenly clear out this storage unit? Or if Chris didn't actually find it in the storage unit, then, like I said, it's a decoy hard drive from somewhere. Now, the other thing is that according to the search warrant, the officers looked inside boxes. Now, there were 26 photos taken when this search warrant was done. Now, of course, we're talking Northport PD, who mistook who mistook Brian Laundrie for Roberta Laundrie. So perhaps they're not so good at doing warrant searches. Because if you can mistake Brian Laundrie for his mother, then perhaps it is possible to search a storage unit and not see a hard drive. Because in this instance, Chris Stearns is claiming that it was just tucked in. To me, it sounds like he's inferring it was tucked in behind storage racks. Whereas, like I said, in another report, he's told them that it was stashed away in a box. Either way, and I have actually done a video on this, so this is why I'm not worrying about bringing up the screenshot about where he found it. But either way, we know from the search warrant that they were not just looking for Maddie in the storage unit. They were looking for anything in terms of devices that could link to the crime, i.e., had they seen a hard drive in that storage unit, they would have taken it, because by that point in time, they knew about the CSAM material. So they would have seized a hard drive had they seen it. So I'm actually thinking that perhaps that hard drive, the Decoy hard drive, may not have even been in the storage unit. Now, we don't know what was on that Decoy hard drive. That information doesn't come out in the interview, and it's nothing that's come out through the various FOIA requests. The other thing, like I said, hasn't come out from the various FOIA requests, is any images of that storage unit. So we don't know what the inside of that storage unit truly looks like. Now, before you turn around and say, but hey, there are images of the storage unit, I believe that was the case too. And like I said, the video that I did yesterday, the whole premise of that was me talking about Chris Stearns claiming that the storage unit was so chockers that, you couldn't squeeze in there anything, and then him contradicting himself, talking about being able to get along the side of it alongside the shelving and everything. And then I was going to show the images that have been released through FOIA requests and say, well, that doesn't look like a storage unit that is chockers. But as I was looking at them, I realised the images that we have been given from FOIA requests are not Chris Stern's storage unit. So let's have a look at them, and I'll explain that as we go along. So I am just going to ask, if you have come across additional photos on anyone else's channel, can you give me a shout out down below and let me know so I can chase it up and find those photos. I am actually going to ask Paula if she has more photos from the storage unit, because I think she's probably the first person to ask. But all I have is 6 images. The first image we have here, we can see a look at multiple storage units from a distance, and you can see that door that is open on the end of that line of storage units, and then they home in on that door, so we know that the images that follow are the inside behind that door. So just for the purpose of matching it up, when we look at the next photos, you can see through the gap in the door there's a blue tub, and on the right hand side of the door you can see shelving. Now I also want to point out here, before we look at the inside of the storage unit, that we know that Chris's storage unit has a roller door, because he gives that big long story about it being unlocked because he hadn't put the lock through properly. That does not apply to this door. He gives this whole big long spiel about how when you shut it, you've got to slide something through, and then you put the lock through, and somehow the lock was put in the wrong spot, yada yada. That is all talking about a storage unit roller door, not a door like this. These kind of doors are not confusing. You put the key in the handle, you turn the key, you unlock the door. So we know that Chris has an entrance to his storage unit that is a roller door. Now, when I first saw the images, the further out image that showed this door open, I thought, oh, well, he must have a roller door and a side door. That's a bit unique, but that is not the case. Let's keep looking. Okay, so I've put an image on the left hand side, which is the first image I showed you, and you can see that the door opens towards the front of the unit. You can also see there's that blue plastic thing through the door, which we can now see is like a blue esky of some sort. But behind that esky is a solid wall. So that whole section there where the door is completely separate to where the roller door is. There's no roller door into this area that's been photographed. This isn't a storage unit. So what is this? This is not Chris Stearns' storage unit that we've been given images of. Why is it in the FOIA documents or FOIA releases? I'll show you the other images, and then that should provide some explanation for you. Okay, so just so you can get your bearings, I've included the previous image again on the left hand side there. You can see there's a second blue tub up against the side wall at the back there, so directly opposite the door. And then you can see it again in that center image, the very end of it, just on the end there, like a very narrow bit there, meaning that what you're seeing, all those building materials again, are on another side wall, meaning that this whole unit is only the width of from the door to the second door that you saw in that first image. This is not Chris Stearns' storage unit. There's no roller door here. There's nowhere where you would see a roller door. And of course, it is not Chocker's. It certainly doesn't have any dog crates. It doesn't have any storage boxes. So let's have a look at the other photos, and this will explain what it is and why this was released amongst all the foyer things. Now, I read a comment somewhere where someone was claiming that Chris had some nasty office stashed away in his storage unit, where he was, they were speculating that he had some nasty office where he was saving or selling CSAM or something. And I can see now where that comes from, because we have this unit here with all these plugs going into it, and you see that there is power to it because there's a green light on the far end of it. So people believing that this was Chris's storage unit have seen this and thought it had connections with something nefarious. But it doesn't. Like I said, this is not Chris Stearns' storage unit. What's this box? Let's look at the next picture, and I think that will explain it. Okay, so on the top shelf there, you can see a whole heap of devices, and you can see that there is a blue, what appears to be a blue network cable sitting on top of a black box. There's a red box to the side of that. There's all these lights lit up. This is basically the security portion of the storage unit. I'm guessing that this box is what records camera footage from the storage unit. Now, if you remember in their reports, they talk about wanting to access camera footage from the storage unit, but that it wasn't working. One of the officers went in and apparently reconnected it all, so something was wrong with it, and still was unable to obtain footage from the cameras. So this is essentially the setup by the actual owners of the storage unit that records security footage. That's all these images are. Because they had to go in and they had to access or try to access the security footage, they had to photograph it as part of the documentation of what they were doing. For some reason, these photos have been released, but not the photos of Chris Stearns' storage unit. So we are still in the dark as to what the inside of Chris Stearns' storage unit looks like, which is very interesting. Like I said, if you've seen images of the inside of Chris's storage unit, not these, please let me know so I can follow them up. I'm also curious to know if images have been released of Chris Stearns' bedroom at Northport, because I've not come across them either. Why are they not being released? Is it just because no one has specifically asked for them, or is there another reason? So this is slightly different to what I had intended with this video, but like I said, I thought it was probably important to go through. I wanted to highlight some of the inconsistencies in Chris's statements around the storage unit. I think he was trying to establish a narrative there that would fit with his Decoy hard drive, and also that would distract from the fact that Stefan had gone to the house. But I also wanted to show these images and point out that they are not images from the inside of Chris's storage unit. So, thanks for watching. If you're new, please do subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. YouTube loves that, and it helps me to get seen by more people. And leave a comment below. I know this probably hasn't been quite as much of a hard-hitting video as some of my more recent ones, but I thought it was something that it was worth touching on. So thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I've been